In this episode, I'm going to be sharing with you how I turn ChatGPT against itself and what to look out for when you're using ChatGPT so you avoid these mistakes that people are doing. I'm also going to be sharing with you some funny moments that happened this past week that you don't want to miss, along with how I'm working with experts to help me overcome my content burnout and how you can overcome content burnout. So I'm going to share some tips on how to avoid it and what to do if you find yourself in the burnout phase in your career or whatever you're doing. So definitely tune in. This is the podcast in the rough. Tune in every Friday for new adventurous episodes. All right, welcome back to the podcast in the rough. This is episode 144. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas, and I'm really excited to dive right into this episode. It's unscripted. This is season 5. I'm giving you all of it. I'm giving you everything, unedited. So I hope you've been enjoying this. Last week was my first episode that I really broke over an hour. Like, go back, it's full of information, it's packed, and I was surprised that I actually went an hour because I'm used to making this like nice 6-minute to 20-minute bangers, and I was like, it's too scripted, so I had to like open that up. But I want to dive right in because it's so important to me to talk about this, and I want to get your feedback, whether it's in a group or it's underneath the, where you're seeing this video or on this podcast episode, wherever you see this on social media, DM me. I want to know. The topic is how I turn ChatGPT against itself, right? It sounds really good, doesn't it? No, literally, I was thinking about this today. I was like, I have some questions. So here's the thing. I've used ChatGPT for several things, checking it out. I'm still new to it, but, understanding prompts. I wanted to understand this beast, right? I want to know what it's all about. How can it really help us? But what I keep seeing is people just using it and being lazy with it. Or they're using it, but maybe they don't know what to do with it, or they're just doing it and hoping no one notices it. I've been noticing patterns in ChatGPT, like written patterns. One of the key red flags that someone's used to ChatGPT to write their content on social media or a post is that there's a lot of emojis inside the chat. Now you can ask to remove those, but all this fluff like microphones or stars or rainbows or you name it, a coffee cup, like a rocket. They use the rocket ship a lot. You'll see that a lot. Also, words like delve into, unveil, pull back the curtains, elevate. All these are words that I'm seeing across the board that ChatGPT is generating. And so I turned to ChatGPT and this is the question I asked it. I said, what are the key words and patterns that ChatGPT uses that can be identified that clearly shows that it's written by ChatGPT? Now, I know there's software out there that companies use to identify these things, especially in schools and colleges or whatever. But you can really see this stuff. I see it all the time. I go, well, that's ChatGPT. And when I was searching the internet, looking for things to get more ideas about, what are some of the topics I didn't cover? And I didn't want to use ChatGPT for this. I didn't want to ask it that. I want to do my research, right? And you could easily use ChatGPT to think for things like that. What are some of the key questions that people are asking about something, the topic? Bam, it gives you a list. Now that's when you dive deeper, right? But what I did is I asked this question to myself, and I was like, all right, let me do some research. And I stumbled across an article. And I started reading this article in hopes to, maybe unlock some ideas on some content I can create for my podcast. And I started reading it and I started seeing these, red flags that ChatGPT wrote this. And I'm like, what? And I keep reading and I'm like, oh my gosh, this whole thing is written by ChatGPT. Now, that's not a bad thing, but the problem is when it's clearly just written by ChatGPT. Someone just put a prompt in and said, write me an article about this, and they put it up there. Now, I understand. It's pulling from the internet. It's giving you a pretty decent article. But for me, I guess I'm looking for someone who's, putting in their years of experience into an article, into something that I can, I'm learning what they navigated those waters through, right? They went through a journey. They figured it out, their trials and tribulations. And I'd love to get your feedback in the comments. Would you prefer to get the right, correct, formulated information that the ChatGPT has gathered from the social media realm, right? The internet, all over it, scoured it and gave it to you? I think it's a powerful tool. And it gives you that information. Or would you want to read something that actually has more of someone's years of experience, right? Like take a plumber, for instance. Like you can ask it to write an article about plumbing, but there might be some things that a plumber had went through that isn't talked about, but it's an experience and it's a little known thing that they share amongst plumbers, if you will. And maybe you learn about it that you didn't know, like a hack or something to watch out for, or like how to prepare for something like this. Like something like it's missing the human element. And this is where I want to dive a little deeper. So the first question is, would you rather have all ChatGPT write articles? Are you okay with reading articles and books and news releases that strictly just someone put a prompt in and it gathered information and built that? Or would you rather read something that has written by a human? And then the hybrid, of course, is where I'm getting to. Where I'm getting to is how I look at ChatGPT with my brain, because I'm super creative. I go, this is amazing, because I can actually ask it some prompts, build something from it, then go back in and redefine it, and ask it more and dive deeper and redefine and dive deeper and redefine, and then add my own strategic experiences to that or my knowledge to that, and really craft a masterpiece of a really great strategic or well thought out, story, plan, agenda, strategy, know-how, and share that online. That's powerful. Like if I wanted to really make an ebook, I would do that way. I'd be like, hey, for me, help me with grammar. Bam. Fix all the things that I might have messed up. Okay, organize this to fit the best for the reader. Like I want the reader to go on this adventure, and maybe I wrote all this out and it's just scrambled. Can you organize this for me? And then I might go and consider, can you revise some of my context and the stuff I've written about to be a little more lighter? Maybe have a little more humor in it if that's it. And allow it to fluff that, right? But I'm not going to just go in there and go, write me a book. Bam, it's done. And then take credit for that. That's not without revising. So that's where ChatGPT has me worried, because I'm seeing a lot of people just get by with that very thing. And the scary part is companies hiring strategists to do this very thing. And the strategists are now like, we're just going to ChatGPT it. Like, you still have to use your knowledge to navigate ChatGPT. It's a tool to speed up the process, but it shouldn't be the one that replaces how you think. And I see a lot of people doing ChatGPT so much that literally they can't think on their own anymore. They're just like so reliant on that. It's kind of like, you get someone who does a lot of stuff for you, and next thing you know, you don't know how to go get your own mail. You just walk out to the mailbox and get it. Like, it comes at 2:00 or whatever. Like, just go get the mail. And so you can't rely on this, but I'm not against it. It's a great tool, and it can help you. Like, I've used ChatGPT to organize blog posts. I've used it to help me decide which order of videos that I have created in my career. I have a huge catalog, a library of content, and I've listed them out. Like, this is what this video is. I gave it its information. I said, when would be the best times throughout the year to post some of these videos that don't fall into like holidays? And it recommended some pretty decent stuff. And I was like, well, that's exciting, especially when you plug that in with an agenda that we already know about that's coming up. Like, they do it on YouTube, like it's called polling, like there's a NASCAR event or football game coming up. Like, you can ramp up your marketing theme around that. Like, these are strategies that I've been paid by the top 1%er, right? To go in and navigate the waters and help their businesses blow up, those brands, those big businesses, and lay that out. Now, again, we had ChatGPT in some of these companies, but we never turned to it like this. I never could go lay a strategy guide down to the CFO, the CEO, that was written by ChatGPT. There's no way. It wouldn't work. Now, I can organize that, but I'm paid for my skill, because my skill has been able to produce. And I get it. There's not a lot of people that have the skill set to be able to produce on that level, right? There's many levels. If anything, ChatGPT has given us all a nice playing field, if you will, to be able to compete and actually just keep up. I feel like it really just brought everyone that were like, let's just say that just kind of like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm not really good at tech. I'm not really good at writing, but I want to play the game. And bam, it picks them up a little bit. And if anything, I would say let's use ChatGPT to learn. Like, You can go in there and say, teach me something and learn how that works, but don't rely on it. Now take it to the next stage. So if anything, like if you were going to write something out, just revise it and make your own to it. But yeah, like seeing these patterns, when I see these patterns online, I'm just like, I'm really, listen, it might just be me. Comment below. Is it just me? Or are you like that too? Like you see a post that's written, let's just say an entrepreneur, and they're trying to market to you. And you see that you clearly see that it's a ChatGPT. They didn't even take the time to write it. They didn't even take the time to write that post. Or whoever they hired to do their social media did not take the time to actually care about making it more of a human experience and more of a conversation instead of just straight sales tactics that just go right over the head. It doesn't mean anything. Like I would much rather read someone's story who has a small blurb that just says, this past weekend's been crazy, or this year has been crazy in my business. Here's some things I learned to overcome, these pitfalls, or this is what we went through and this is how I overcame that. They got a little personal on it versus just watch so-and-so pull back the curtains on their story of their hero's journey and how they, it's just too normal, if you will. I don't know. It's flat. I'm going to call it flat. But some of the stuff that ChatGPT responded to my earlier question when I said, what are the key words and patterns that ChatGPT uses that can be identified that clearly shows that it was written by ChatGPT? That was my question. And without giving you, I'm gonna put the actual full out what it said back to me in my blog. So you go check that out at thepodcastontherough.com and then go to blog under this episode 144. But to go over the basics, it said basically generic, phrasing. It said vague or broad answers, repetition, that's big, repeating itself throughout the thing, throughout the context of the article or whatever you post. Overused formula language, it goes into detail there. I was like, okay, that's interesting. So this is why I said I turned ChatGPT against itself. Like, tell me why you don't work well, or tell me your flaws, right? And that's kind of what it did. Context switching challenges. Okay, so that right there is big because it's talking about how, struggle with maintaining consistency of context over long conversation, resulting in occasional, disconnect, completely abrupt stopping and switching, it doesn't stay consistent. That's big. Limited functional knowledge, right? It's still learning, right? Unusual sentence structures, of course, right? I see that. But that's if you're writing something longer. That's when I was talking about that article, that's how I identified that. But in short, I'm going to tell you what to look out for and just do this. It's kind of like when you're like, I'm going to go buy a red car and you never see red cars for some reason. And as soon as you go to get the red car and you drive off the lot with it, now everybody has a red car. You're like, why has everyone got a red car? It's because your brain is now attached to seeing that, right? So that's kind of where I see it. When I'm social media, there's things to look for. Look for it. Like when you see a bunch of, emojis, just all over the place, and the rocket ships, or you're seeing stars and you're seeing microphones, or you're seeing, definitely the stars is a big one. But when you start seeing these things in the context of the post, the social media post, bam, ChatGPT, right? Or if you see it says we're going to pull back the curtains, we're going to unveil, we're going to elevate. Now, what sucks about elevate is I have a whole company, and it's a entertainment / coaching / virtual event and physical event, whatever, company. Basically, my company is called Elevate 360 Challenge, and it's Elevate 360 Challenge events, and I launched it earlier this year. And we put on these live, virtual, and in-person events with keynote speakers, and it's amazing. I love it. And my name is it's Elevate 360 Challenge. It's and that's one of the words that everyone sees. So now I have to juggle with that and make sure that all my posts that we're doing for that company has a lot of human communication inside that. It cannot look robotic, if you will, or AI or fake, right? And so, it's been a little traction. So there's some things, you got to look out for. But when you start seeing that in these posts, you can be like, hey, that person, and they might not have, right? I'm just going to say that not everyone's post that has, icons in it and stuff like that and emojis They're not saying that every one of those are used. Sometimes people do like to use those things because it's picking up a pattern. But when you start to see that mixed with those words, it's a problem. So why does it make me nervous? Why it makes me nervous? And I would love your feedback. Does ChatGPT make you nervous and are uneasy? Like, I'm not afraid of it. I just look at it like, man, like, where are we going with things? It's dial-up internet, right? And pretty soon it's gonna be great. It's gonna be amazing. And I'm embracing the change. I think it's great, especially if it could speed up my workflow. But I think the problem is I'm seeing a lot of people, they get through training courses or college courses, and I mean, there's a reason why you have to do homework. There's a reason why you have college courses, right? And you're not supposed to ace everyone. It's training you to think, to have critical thinking skills, to think long form, short form, can you think on your own? Can you think under pressure? Completing just a task, like, here's something to do. Can you do it in a timely manner and turn it in? It's like, it's training you to follow agendas, a structure. It's not just acing a test or getting through a course. There's a reason why these things take long. And I'm not 100% for college. I'm not 100% for school and education, depending on how it's taught. But I will say that there's a reason for it. And I just feel that I just want to make sure that people don't just show up in the workforce standing there thinking that they're going to be able to turn to this ChatGPT and solve all the problems or make the daily grind happen. That's not how it's going to work. So it has to be a tool. And if anything, just get really good at learning your prompts. Again, like, people think it's going to replace so many jobs, and in some cases it may. But what it's really going to do is those companies are still going to have to hire someone who now knows how to use this machine properly, better than the rest. So now you have to become an expert in this. And so it's not like, maybe it does cut down on the amount of people in that position. Like, maybe you don't have a whole department of writers. Maybe you have 2 or 3 now. But it's going to be that it's going to also come with the cost. So companies don't, if you're a company, don't think you're going to just, right now you're getting by. You're using it. Your team's playing around with it, but you wait. You're going to be paying top dollar. You're going to wish that you can go back and find someone with that type of skill set. And this brings me to my next question. Our topic, I should say, that I have a question for you though. Comment below, have you thought about this? Have you thought about what happens to movies, music, entertainment in the next 20, 30 years when the young producers, creators, writers who've been using social media or using ChatGPT and things like that to think for them have entered the industry? Do you think those are going to be really good blockbuster hits, if you will? Do you think they're going to be great performance shows? Do you think they're going to be amazing books to read? Or are they just going to be really kind of just simple to hold retention and written for the people that are going to just turn away in 2 seconds if it's not entertaining enough? Where now you sit down with a movie and you can watch a long movie now. Thank goodness the movies are actually getting longer, because I feel like if they were getting shorter, we would fall into that pitfall of like, wow, movies are starting to take a hit and this sucks. I love my entertainment. Right now, most people in society right now are paying money on entertainment. That's where their money's going. They want to experience something. But I hope that experience never changes because someone has relied on AI to create the experience for you. Now, I know in the future, I get it. It's going to be really, really good. And hopefully one day it is, where it's like, it's going to create like the ultimate show. It's going to take genius minds and brains that are downloaded, if you will, into this social media realm or this internet. And we're going to be able to have like next level stuff. That's cool. But right now, I just really hope the creative people keep staying creative. Like when I just seen this recent AI video, I felt so bad for my fellow videographers, content creators, filmmakers. So many of them in the comments were like, all right, just sell my cameras. Stop doing it. Sell my gear. I'm going to go get a job. And I was like, no, like, don't give up. Like, no, like, I get it. It's scary. It's like, wow, why do you even need us? If you could just type in some prompts and you get like this dog in a window in Paris or whatever, like, or this drone flying around a building that looks so real. Like, why do you need us? No, we need you because we need that creative human element, that creative flow, the process. It's art. It's allowing us to be better, do better. And so I think if anything, to my fellow content creators and filmmakers, because, I am ZT Films, right? Like, I speak on this because from my experience, this is what my whole career is based on, is content creating and filmmaking and commercial videography. And I've become really, really good at it. And I've mastered a lot of things, and I'm known, right, because of it. It's a career that I never thought I would have, and here it is. And I challenge everybody to say, hey, you know what? That's okay. Let the AI create it, because it can't think like we think. It can't think. That's just it. It's not real artificial intelligence. It doesn't think on its own. It's just gathering information. And that is going to force us to be even more creative. And you know what that does? That separates us. And now we become the famous, artists, painters, filmmakers, directors, writers, right? Content creators. Wow, that person's style is unmatched. It's amazing. I love that person's style, right? And so you become the Van Gogh, if you will. You become the famous painting, the Mona Lisa, whatever, right? Your work will be identified, and that's just going to challenge us to become more creative and better. But it is going to be a lot of grind, and we are already under pressure to have to explain ourselves why it's important to use us and not some robot or someone who has an agency that does this with people that are not skilled enough to do this, but they're doing it anyways, like, because it's cheaper. Well, yeah, you get what you pay for, So it's one of those things. So I would love to get your opinion. Are you concerned with where ChatGPT and AI is going for entertainment purposes? I guess that's my question. I'd love to know. I'd love to know. Listen, I want to get into this funny story. This is ridiculous. Okay, this past weekend / week, it was the end of the weekend. I think it was Friday last week. There's so many things that happen. Okay, where do I start? First, let's start with this. I was going to bed late, and oh no. Okay, let's start with that. So here's what happened. It was late at night. It was like 1 a.m. I'm signing off. I'm done. I'm going to bed. And I didn't turn the bathroom light on. It was dark. I got a little night light in there, right? So we have some illumination, whatever you call that. Like we have a night light. It's somewhat lit up. And I go in there and I just grab my toothbrush and I start brushing my teeth, right? And while I'm brushing my teeth for a good, I'm brushing for a good 2 minutes, And I'm like, why does this my toothbrush must be worn out. It's a little different, right? A little different. And then I pull it out of my mouth, I look, and I'm like, this ain't my toothbrush. Immediately, I'm like, okay, I want to gag. Oh no, right? I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's my daughter's toothbrush. No worries, right? We're just going to throw that out and get her a new one. We're good to go. I'm thinking, my daughter's, she got a clean mouth. It's fine. I don't feel as disgusted, right? I don't want to use someone else's toothbrush, but if I had to, my daughter's is fine. So I threw her toothbrush out, and I replaced it. I can't believe I'm sharing this story. It's so vulnerable because it's nasty. It's have you ever done this? That's the question. Have you ever shared someone's toothbrush? Do you think it's gross? Right? So I didn't think about it because I didn't want to gag myself and make myself sick because I'm really almost like a germaphobe. I'm there. I'm like, that's gross. So I go to sleep, no big deal. Midday the next day, I'm getting ready to head out, just finished some business meetings. And my wife goes, why'd you throw my toothbrush away? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was your toothbrush. No. Immediately back into gag mode. I was just sick to my stomach. Oh my gosh. Now again, but it's my wife's mouth's not disgusting. She brushed her teeth. She got better teeth than me, right? But I guess for me, it was just the gross concept of my kid's toothbrush or my wife's toothbrush. Which one would I rather do? I'd probably use the kids' one because I don't know. It just seems you can have, as an adult, you get more plaque, you have more buildup. Your mouth is probably a little more dirtier, I guess. At least that's how I think. But I thought that was disgusting, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then she came in and was just like, why did you throw my toothbrush away? I was like, oh no, that was yours. That's bad. So I'd love to know. Comment, is that gross? Have you done it? And if you had to choose your significant other's toothbrush or your kid's toothbrush, which would it be? I'd love to know. I'd love to know what that is. Now, let me get into the other crazy story. And I'd also love your feedback on this, because this is just like, don't be suspicious, right? Don't be suspicious. So I'm walking around my neighborhood, taking my walk with my wife. We're taking our walk. I'm walking around, and I walk by a house that's down the street from me. The front door is open. Now, this person that lives there, I know what their vehicle is. Nobody's home. Front door wide open. So I turned to my wife. I said, what do we do? She goes, we go shut the door. I'm like, no, it could be a crime scene. So my mind's going into like, I'm watching all these crime story movies, and documentaries. I'm like, immediately my mind's like, dude, this dude's in there. He's probably laid out, right? Like, it's not good. Or maybe the robbers are still in there. I don't know. The door's open. She's like, no, it's windy. It just blew it open. I'm like, yeah, but really? You're just going to that's going to be it for you? That's how your brain works? You're like, oh, it's windy outside. Must have blew the front door open. No suspicion here. Where I'm like, wait a minute. I think the back gate's ajar, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's going on there? Like, now I'm like, neighborhood watch. Now I'm like, we're going to investigate true crimes, right? And so, like, I didn't know what to do. And I was like, do we call? Do we report it? Do we wait around? Do we see what's going on? And we stuck around a little bit to see if there's anyone in the house, and there wasn't. But I was like, I'm not even walking up the steps because, then I'm like, what if this dude's got, like, a doorbell camera, and they're like, hey, thanks for walking by and not doing anything. But I would have been like, hey, I thought maybe they were in there. I thought maybe you were tied up. I don't know. So that's what I was thinking. I was like, don't be suspicious. But then walking around, we kind of just let it go because it was a big circle. We're like, we'll come back and we'll see because this person comes and goes. Maybe they'll be back. But on the way back, they were already home, right? So immediately, like, we're like, all right, cool. It's fine. It was taken care of. Nothing happened. We didn't have to react. It was good, right? But then, like, literally everywhere I'm walking, I start, like, looking around. I'm like, well, that person's front door is open too, but they have a screen. There's a big difference. Screen door or a glass door, front door open. It's a big different situation than no screen, no glass, front door open. Wind and leaves and squirrels coming in. Like, that's different, right? Just one little, piece of metal or screen makes the whole situation different. And my mind think, true crime. So I'm walking around the neighborhood. I'm like, let's look at all the suspicious stuff. Like, this dude's walking at me with his dog on the sidewalk, and as he gets closer to me, he reaches into his jacket. I'm like, oh no, he's got a gun, a knife. What does he got? And here he's pulling out tissue because he's just wiping his nose because, I don't know, allergies. I'm like, why'd you do that? You should have waited to pass for me because I'm out to react. I was like, what do you got? So it was like suspicious. And then we saw this other dude parked on the side of the street, open up his van doors with no windows in the back, pulls out like a saw, right? A little mini saw, like a sawzall. And then he walks up to this house, and he's looking super sketchy. And no one home at this house. And he walks up, stops at the front door. We're walking. We're kind of keeping an eye on him, fiddling with the door. He don't have no keys. And all of a sudden, he's in. I'm like, he used the sawzall. He cut the door handle off. He cut the door handle apart. He got in, right? Suspicious, right? So it's interesting to see these things, even though he wasn't. He was fine. He was probably just working on something in the house for whoever. But there's so much stuff around the neighborhood that you can look at and be suspicious. I saw the mail truck that had no markings on it, but it was a mail truck. It had a little light on top. Sitting there. Suspicious. No blinkers on, just sitting on the side of the street. Suspicious. As I walk up, the female mail carrier or whatever is in there. She looks at me. She puts down her sub sandwich, waves, and drives off. She was having lunch. Suspicious. Right? You just can't pull up anymore and be suspicious in the neighborhood. So I had to share that with you because I thought that was exciting and funny. At least it was when we were on the journey. Me and my wife are cracking up, though. Like, everywhere we turned, there was something that we could talk about being. The squirrel was suspicious. Squirrel's supposed to run away. This squirrel just waiting for me. I'm walking up, still there, looking at me. I walk right up on him. I'm like, are you going to eat me? What are you doing? And just looked at me. Suspicious, right? So I challenge you to go out and about and look at things that are suspicious, but then hopefully don't play into it. Wait to see it play out and be like, is this really suspicious? Or am I just overthinking? I feel like we do that a lot in our life, especially if you're like me, who've been through some stuff, maybe some trauma. There's some things that like are red flags. I talked about this last week in last week's episode, that maybe you could be suspicious about some stuff. You can overthink things and go, man, and then worry about stuff. And we can't do that. We gotta train ourselves to think clearly, look at things, and go, okay. For those of you who are thinking clearly, good for you. You got this down. It's amazing. So, and speaking about thinking thinking clearly, I want to talk to you about, mental health. And this is my mental health tip and some information I've gathered on mental health, because, I'm sharing more of my mental health journey on this, because like success and social media burnout and content burnout has all affected me. And it's played a role in a lot of ups and downs and trials and tribulations of my business and of my personal life. And I'm navigating that, if you will. I'm trying to get through it. And I'm trying to find a solution. And then it's a true thing. I talked about last week. Social media or content burnout, they call it. And it's like you look at these big YouTubers that were creating daily videos all the time, and now they can't even do it. They just can't do it. And so a lot of professionals are working on solving this, figuring out how to work around it. It's a different thing. And so I'm working with two very special people, experts in their field, to help me overcome my content burnout. And it's deep. Like there's a lot of layers to this, a lot of things you got to figure out and navigate. But I want to share this with you because if you're someone who is feeling burnout or has been burnout, you've been burnout, there's slow fixes that you can start to apply. And I'll share those as I get through my journey, and I'll share some of the tips I've learned. And I'm going to give you a key takeaway today that will help you. But some things to think about to like how do you identify that you might be experiencing burnout is really where I thought the same thing. Is where you think you might be procrastinating on something, or you might be like, oh, I'm getting lazy. I'm not pushing through. You're technically already there with the burnout. And so what I mean by this is it's different to say, I'm going to climb this hill on my exercise today, and you're tired, and you're like, I'm going to stop here. And you're like, no, I can do one more. I can go one more rep. I can walk one more mile. I can climb just 2 more feet, right? That's motivation. That's pushing your body. That's pushing yourself, trying to get a little bit further in your limit. That's physical. When it comes to mental, right, it's a different game because it's not the same as saying, okay, I created like 20 pieces of content. I can create 2 more. No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. You got 20 down or whatever the number is. Or, I built this website. I could build another one right after it. No. Or I did this. I did all my tasks. I could do 5 more. Like the value is not there. And you're not made to be a workhorse and protect, you have to protect yourself is what I'm saying. Like physically you can push. Mentally it's a little harder because your brain gets tired and you'll overstimulate. You'll spill over, if you will. And so that's one of the key takeaways I've learned is don't let yourself spill over. And what I mean by this is you have to gauge where you are in creating content or what you're doing and know when to stop. If you just finish a whole bunch of tasks and you're like, I can do more, but you feel like you're like, why is it taking you longer? Like maybe this task only takes you 10 minutes, but for some reason you're sitting there, it's 20 minutes now, 30 minutes, and you're just like struggling to get through this. You're in that burnout stage and you need to put it down and you need to refresh. You need to take a break. And maybe it's a little bit of break. Maybe it's a full day break. But if you push past, you're going to be hurting for a week, a month, right? Longer. It could really hurt you. And I know some people, like myself, has been in the position at some of these companies or with these entrepreneurs to have to over-deliver and overperform. And you got to be careful there too, because that's where I got my burnout. Working with lots of companies, 8 of them all at once. There was a time where I had 8 different companies working for at the same time. And I was performance strategies, creating strategies and content and videos and overseeing production teams. It was a lot of work. And that much work burnt me out. And I didn't know what it was at the time. I was like, I need to take some time off because it's too much. I couldn't think. I was getting foggy. Or I was getting like really like felt like I was procrastinating. And so these are some things. But so the spillover, don't let yourself spill over. This is what it is. If you sit there and you're holding a lot of stuff on you, like say you're holding a lot of weights, I put like 20, 30 pounds, 40 pounds. Let's just say your max is 100 pounds. I put 100 pounds on you. Now you're really sweating. You can only hold this. You can only hold this 100 pounds for maybe 30, 40 seconds, right? So we know you're already there and it's heavy and you're going to have to set it down. But what happens if I stack another 25, 50 pounds on top of that right when I put the 100 pounds on? You're going to drop it, right? It's almost filling a glass. You're going to spill over. You're going to drop the weights immediately, crash and burn. So you got to know your limit. Like, hey, instead of going to 100 pounds because you know that's your max, say I'm only going to allow myself to get to 75 to 85 pounds, and then I'm going to back off, let myself reset, and then I'm going to take the challenge on again. I'm going to take that extra, 15, 10 pounds left over, and I'm going to apply myself to it wholeheartedly and 100% to that, instead of saying I'm going to give 50% or 25% of myself to this because that's all I got left in the tank. So don't let yourself spill over. That's my mental health tip today. Everything you do this week, it doesn't mean you're procrastinating too. Don't beat yourself up. It means if you know you've done what you needed to do and you got it done and you're trying to really fill the agenda and fill the plate, you might be like, hey, you know what? I have to push some of this away. So don't overdo it. And that's what I want to share with you. But listen, when we come back after this break, I want to talk to you about what's coming to the podcast, what's new, and it's exciting, and I want to talk about it. So I'll be right back. Okay, once again, if you would like to join me inside the Podcast Community Mastermind Facebook group, it is absolutely free. All you have to do is go to thepodcastintherough.com/learn. That is thepodcastintherough.com/learn, and get inside the group and learn how to podcast from start to success. All right, if you're enjoying this podcast episode, I would love for you to give me a rating and review about this podcast by heading over to thepodcastintherough.com and scrolling to the bottom of the page and leaving us a review. Or if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a star rating and a review. It would help us reach more people and get them to learn about the Podcast in the Rough. Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it. All right, what is coming to the podcast in season 5? What is new? Okay, so I didn't play the ad in this episode, but it's my Buy Me a Coffee ad. I found this exciting website when I first started season 3, and it's called buymecoffee.com. And I love it because it's not Patreon, right? Nothing against Patreon, but I wanted something new, something different. And so I started building this out, and I love the functionality of buymecoffee.com. And you can definitely check this out because you might want to use it. And I talked about it in earlier episodes too, but it's a great way to allow people to support you and your projects and endeavors. And in this case, it's to support the podcast and get exclusive content, like extra great premium content. So it's, you could check mine out at thepodcastintherough.com. You could actually go there, but it's buymecoffee.com/in-the-rough. I mean, you go to there, check it out, take a look at it. And I'm excited about it, but I haven't had a lot of growth in this area. Right? A lot of people want to support the podcast. And so I've asked a lot of people questions about okay, so you wanted to support the podcast, but when you went to buymeacoffee.com/in-the-rough, it kind of intimidated you. What was the issue? One was some said there's too many options. Some said, because I have different tiers. They didn't know which one they wanted. They want them all, right? Some said we wanted to just donate, and we were thinking about just giving you a certain amount of money to this, and that was great. That's where you can go in and just buy a cup of coffee or whatever, and you could set the price. But they were unfamiliar with the platform. So they didn't know what that was going to look like sign up or commitment or what am I getting tied into. But they said they understood Patreon. And if you had Patreon, we would have did that. So instead they go back to another form of supporting the podcast, which I absolutely love. And I'll take this all day, every day. And that is where they gave me a rating and review on Apple Podcast. So I love that. I'll take that for sure. So when I started thinking about that, I was like, all right, I need to now create an option to choose. Do you want to go to Buy Me a Coffee or do you want to go to Patreon? So what's coming to the podcast is I'm in the process of setting up, structuring it just right. So you can go and you support the podcast on one of these platforms. If you want to get content and just show your support with a monetary donation, you can go to Patreon or you can go to Buy Me Coffee. Because a lot of people see Patreon and they go, this is, it's almost like PayPal. I know what this is. A lot of people use it. I'm okay with that. That's fine. And so, again, Buy Me a Coffee is a new site. There's a lot of different sites like this. I find Buy Me a Coffee exciting, especially kind of when it goes to the podcast. I feel like it's fun. It's like coffee and podcasting. To me, it kind of works. So I'm gonna open that up, and I challenge you to do the same for your endeavors. If you're doing a podcast or if you're doing this stuff, trying to get people to support you in some way or another, don't just have one, have two. Have a Patreon. I mean, they could be the same content on both sides. You're not giving one more or less than the other. It's just letting the people that want to get involved decide which one is going to work for them. And so I think that's going to be a big takeaway that I think it's going to help a lot of you who's been asking me, hey, what crowdfunding or what, should I use Patreon? Should I use this? And there's a lot of other options, but I'm only going to speak on the ones I use. Now, I did use Patreon early on back in 2019. And actually, I think I started, it was 2019. And there's some functionalities I didn't like about it. It wasn't there. But again, going back to it, I'm like, oh, it works for me now because I've changed how I set my things up. So it does work for me. It didn't work for me before because I couldn't really communicate with the people on there as much as I wanted to in the way I wanted to. But now it's different. So you got to look at like, what is your needs? What's going to work for you? And so I'm excited about that. That's coming. And also the other thing that I'm excited about with the Podcast in the Rough is I'm just sharing more of my personal insights here. And I want to get just to the nitty gritty of like, what's really important? What can we share? Like go back to my roots and like longer episodes, less scripted episodes. I'm going to bring on more guests in this podcast. So I have to make room for those things instead of scripting out my episodes as good as they were. They were really polished and it was nice. And I'm going to leave those polished scripted ones for my podcast community mastermind group where I teach you how to podcast from start to success. And what's nice is now I have this catalog on this podcast from season 3, the reboot, and season 4 with a lot of great episodes covering a range of topics in podcasting and how to overcome the hurdles and avoid the pitfalls and build this and that and, all the different things, the tech stuff, everything. And that, led you into the group to get more details and connected with me and talk about that. Like really open up. If you're a podcaster trying to start something, we could talk about it in the group. So now I'm just dedicating those scripted episodes to the group as they come. So I'm building that too. But with my extra premium content, that is more of a deep dive, even more to these episodes that I can't talk about in the main episode because it doesn't fit right. So right now with season 5, it's really just navigating this so it fits within the same theme. I have this theme and I like this theme and what my podcast is really about. And I'm staying true to my roots. For all my longtime followers, I appreciate you. And anybody new coming into this can get excited about, wow, I want to see what this is all about. So expect spontaneous episodes, expect unscripted stuff, not polished, and expect, the fact that I'm getting vulnerable on here and I'm sharing my mental health journey. I'm sharing some other things, like I'm not perfect on the mic. I might say some things that don't make sense because I stumble. I don't know. Maybe I might mess up, but I'm not going to edit this out because I want it to be raw, because I want to show you that it's not perfect. It's almost like we see all these supermodels out there, right? And then all the women, they're like, oh, this is what we got to look at. This is how we got to be. And they realize that's not how they are all the time. And it's okay just to be normal, to be you. I think that same thing's happening in podcasting. A lot of people are being too scripted, too personal, or I'm sorry, not too personal, too professional, too perfect. And so it's intimidating if you're starting out and you're like, I want to get to that level, but how? It's so much. And like, no, like it's okay to really just be you on the microphone and learn to be a better host. And I'm learning to be a better live host. Like I'm doing this more. I call it live because I'm recording it right now and I'm not going to go back and edit it. And I'm using my Rodecaster Pro to hit all the pads, like this little swoosh here. Bam. Right. And I'm just going with the flow and I have bullet points. But live would be like, put on a camera, actually go live, use this. And I want to get there because that sounds exciting and extremely intimidating, but I wanted to share that with you. So anyways, listen, I really do hope that you guys have been enjoying this podcast, second episode of season 5. And I look forward to sharing many, many more. Tune in next week for another great episode. This is the Podcast in the Rough.